Hello everyone, welcome back to Life Stories. My name is Trent, and as usual, we are back with more stories from Reddit/entitledparents. Let's get started. Our first story is a big one, and it's titled, "You Deliberately Injured My Child." I wish I'd known about this community a few years ago when I worked in a well-known British shoe shop, but unfortunately, I didn't. So I'll share with you now an EP encounter I experienced during my time there. I worked on the weekends, and occasionally during the week while I was studying, and my primary role was in the kids department fitting shoes. The kids department was right at the back of the shop, and you had to walk through the adults department to reach it. When serving adult customers, we would radio up to the stockroom and have the shoes brought down through a chute in the back and brought out onto the shop floor. As you can no doubt imagine, on an extremely busy day, the adult staff would have to be careful navigating their way to and from the back shop through the children's department, as it would often be filled with prams, children, and large family groups. Don't get me started on why it's completely ridiculous to have mom, dad, grandparents, aunties, uncles, cousins, friends, all accompanying one child to get a pair of shoes. It all started on a weekday morning. A mother came in with her son, around 3 to 4 years old, to buy a pair of trainers. Our usual system was to greet the customer, measure the child's feet, discuss what sort of shoe they were looking for, and then go to the stockroom to fetch them. This all occurred as normal, and I left the shop floor to go collect the styles the mother had chosen. The mother and her son were the only customers in the children's department at the time, and the boy was taking advantage of the empty space and tearing around the sections of seats and destroying the displays by throwing the shoes, price cards, etc. on the floor. Between the display shelves, the shop had large mirrors, and this little boy decided to hide in the space, meaning you couldn't properly see him when walking back and forth past the shelves. While another member of the staff was walking to the back shop to collect a customer's shoes, he ran out without warning and collided into the staff member. The children's department was carpeted, thank God, as we had to kneel on it all day, but the adult section had a tiled floor. The boy landed on the hard tiled surface and immediately started wailing at the top of his lungs. His mother then came over. She had been ignoring him up until this point and had been glued to her phone, and gave the member of the staff a lot of grief for injuring her little angel, who by now was sporting a small bump on his forehead. She called the staff member careless, told her she was unsuitable to work with children, and that her child had the right to play in the shop, and tried to accuse her of hurting her own son deliberately. My manager intervened at this point and tried to calm the woman down. I arrived back on the shop floor with boxes of trainers and was sent back upstairs to get a damp cold cloth to put on the child's head in an attempt to slow the swelling. The member of staff involved left the shop floor as she was shaken and upset by the mother's reaction, and I was left to finish serving her. She then complained at length to me about how dangerous our shop was and that staff needed to be more careful. She kept making the point that he was only playing and that we had put him in danger. I responded with non-committal noises to her various complaints, partly as I hadn't witnessed the event, and partly because I had already gathered at this point that she's an unreasonable cow and wanted as little grief as possible. And by now, the little boy had completely settled down. He'd probably gotten a fright more than anyone else, and was happily trying on the trainers. We'd usually ask the child to go for a walk in the new shoes, as part of checking out the fit, and at me asking him to do this, the child raced away, back into the adults department at the other end of the shop. We got a lot of elderly customers, and many of them were slow in reacting, so it's just as well this boy didn't have another accident crashing into someone given the life-threatening accident he'd had just minutes ago. The mother said absolutely nothing and cooed over, "What a big, special, clever boy he was." I then called him back to finish checking the fit, as she wasn't bothered by his antics, but I was desperate to get rid of them. They left shortly after, but not without the mother causing another scene in front of the other customers, and threatening to go to head office about the incident. The minute she was out the door, I shot up to the staff room to check on my colleague and find out exactly what had happened. So, as you can no doubt gather, it was entirely our fault that this mother allowed him to run around in a shop. It's what children do. While not at least keeping an eye on him, because updating Facebook was more important. There was no apology for her overreaction, which reduced the staff member involved to tears, and there seemed to be no lesson learned as she quite happily let him run back into a busy, hard-surfaced area of the shop just minutes after he'd already fallen on the floor. There was no apology for the awful mess he'd left with display shoes scattered all over the floor, and despite my manager's efforts to try and help with the cloth, she was not appeased in any way. It was a busy shop with staff trying to do their jobs and serve customers, though apparently their needs were secondary to hers. This story doesn't have a satisfying ending where she was told in no uncertain terms that she was responsible for looking after her child and that it was dangerous for him to be running around in a busy shop. My manager was entirely too groveling, in my opinion. So what if she complained to head office? It was an accident that could have been avoided if she'd bothered to pay attention to her son's actions. From my experience in customer service, customers get away by acting like massive dumbos because some managers don't want to challenge them and instead apologize profusely, and this sends the message that it's completely acceptable for customers to act in this manner. Our next story is titled, "EM Tries to, and Successfully, Takes My Money Until I've Had Enough." On mobile, so sorry for any formatting issues or mistakes. Also, sorry this got longer than I thought it would. I forgot how angry this makes me. Our cast is EM, my entitled mother, and me, yours truly. So, a bit of backstory. My parents have been divorced since I was little, so it's been my mom and I for the most part. My dad does pay child support, and my mom sends the bills for all my expensive needs, and he pays half of that too. His will come in later. My mom and I haven't had a healthy relationship since I was in the single digits. As I got older, she got more and more entitled. Once I got to the age where I could work, I went away for a few weeks to work at a summer camp where I got paid a few $100s. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was my first real paycheck. When I got back, my mom immediately took my paycheck and said, "It's compensation for you abandoning me these weeks and not doing your chores." I was frustrated, but let it go. A few months later, I moved out, tired of her entitled and abusive ways. If curious, read previous stories of mine. After her sabotaging my first job, I got a job working fast food. When she found out, she demanded my paychecks and stated, "You need to give them to me because you owe me for raising you." I told her no, and she called me a spoiled brat. Then, I got into contact with my father, whom my mom had told me not to contact, and I informed him that I was no longer living with my mom. But she was still getting child support and that it wasn't going towards me. Not because I wanted the money, but because he should know. He and I got back in contact, and he took the legal steps so that I should get the money directly, and so my mom couldn't sue. Once my mom found out, crap hit the fan. "Why didn't I get a notice I'm not receiving child support from your father?" "Because I'm not living with you. The child support goes directly to me." "Excuse me? That is my income." "It's the money that's supposed to go towards me, not your income. You're the one who doesn't want to work." "I shouldn't have to work right now. I can't work and I need that money." "EM, that money is supposed to go towards me, and it hasn't been for over 6 months since before I even moved out." But you're not responsible enough. You're going to waste it. You're a child." "I have more money than you right now. I put half of every paycheck in a savings account. How am I not responsible? The money's going to my education, and that's final." "You're so ungrateful. You don't deserve that money. I need it. That money is legally mine, and you haven't used that money on me in like a year. I'm not going to ask for it back, but you've taken more than enough." My mom screamed at me a bit more before hanging up. After that, she didn't speak to me for a month or two until I had a scheduled family therapy session with her where she proceeded to tell the therapist how she was worried about me spending all my money and acted like she was concerned about me. EM said to the therapist, "I just want to save it for her. She isn't old enough to manage all her money. She's a binge eater and will spend all her money on food and waste it all. I'm just looking out for her." "EM, you know that's BS. I've been putting half of every paycheck away into savings, and I have more money than you." The therapist agreed that I should hold on to my own money, and at 16, I was old enough to try and manage my own money. My mom stormed off at the end of the session, and after calling me a liar and other expletives outside the office. Turns out, after I went home, my mom turned around and went to the therapist and tried to get her to side with her and also access my personal records. I went to personal therapy at the same office. 3 years later, I have a good amount of money saved in my accounts and still have more to my name than she does. I'm in charge of my money and refuse to let her have any access to my things. Good on you. Taking personal responsibility is great, especially when you're that young. And with that out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, that is all the time we have for Life Stories today. Thank you so much for tuning in once again. My name is Trent, and remember, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell to make sure that more Reddit content that we got in the works for you is going to be sent your way. Thanks to all of you, and I hope to see you guys later.